ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, good students. I feel slightly embarrassed. My name has been said too much in the introductions, and I try to really give to it some meaning. I am in an awkward position, and I didn't want to make a keynote presentation, and I didn't want to present a paper. But it's the second conference, but it has been quite some time. We've been dealing with the matters of digitality in architecture, as well as in the Faculty of Architecture here in Tallinn. And I also thought I'm old enough to give a personal introduction to the matter, how I see it. So what I'm, with your permission, delivering is a position paper of highly controversial, speculative, and personal nature. Digital reality. We can ask, is it really? Or maybe we just imagine it. The title image comes to us from Oxford, and metaphorically, it has been called chandelier of quantum. Quantum chandelier, a beautiful word, and a beautiful object. We very often do not use the word beauty in teaching architecture as well as doing architecture, because it can be relative. But here, I think, in this device, the Platonic beauty of good, purposefulness, and celebration of materials comes together. And it comes from the fantastically named journal. It is Quantum Zeitgeist. So quantum in several metaphoric ways. It caught my attention because there was a little explanation what a quantum might be. And I recognized there three axes, X, Z, and Y. And it remembered me of the architectural paradigm that we are at the moment finishing up in global understanding of the word. It really started in Renaissance, when Brunelleschi was trying to show how plan, elevation, and 3D image are a coherent space that can be calculated with geometrical means. So he was making a perspectiva artificialis of the San Giovanni Baptisterium in front of the Milan Cathedral, the Duomo of Maria del Fiores. And for the first time after antiquity, he was able to show how this geometrical space works. And Alberti, he of course was explaining about it and creating what we call today the architectural project. He was first saying that it has to be the projections on three planes where we can explain what the space is about. And it was just a small step from there to go further with Cartesian space, where all the coordinates can be calculated and through which the calculus would develop into the algorithmic heights of today, which are the background of quantum computing. Of course, it created a totally new way of understanding the space, understanding the painting. We could see into the space behind the painting where we are supposed to stand, creating a space-time continuum between Johannes van Eyck, who was standing there with his Molbert, ourselves, and the witnesses of Arnolfini marriage. But even more, I think it developed further with printing press and creation of encyclopedia, which had an obsession to describe things, to take them apart and then describe them in an understandable way, either in axonometric or in perspective, out of which probably the first technological revolution of steam mostly started. And today we are facing the fourth technological revolution. the two next ones being slightly metaphorically taken together as electricity, and after that, the digitality. And this is where the three planes of projection ended up in describing of qubit. This is something that I don't pretend to understand fully, but it uses the architectural three planes of describing the space, and it also takes architecture to the next level, where we are talking about algorithms, not really about the space anymore, unfortunately. Wake-up call. What was the wake-up call for me to go into this digitality and, first of all, digital image? It was 2007. We had the Bronze Soldier riots. And after the riots, I came over a film that was called Nochnoi Dozor, which means in English, The Night Watch, coming from the same name of Rembrandt's famous picture of Netherlands, of paramilitary organization, and highly commercialized depiction of the dignitaries of that organization. It was based on a book by Sergei Lukyanenko, and the book, fantasy book, was one of the first to describe the Soviet nostalgia. The Soviet nostalgia was brought into that fantasy book that was then later on translated and then made a film of. And the film had the same name, Nochnoi Dozor, and it was highly popular. It was highly popular since 2004, 2005. And it had, for me, a peculiar effect. I suddenly recognized that poetic visual image has a power which hasn't been seen since the propaganda of the Soviet Union that nobody really took very seriously since I remember it. But suddenly the image was there with all the connotations of the bad and evil, light and dark, us and others, Soviet and foreign. And it was shown in all of the images. It was shown in cars, in ladies, in garments, and so on. And then, of course, the Bronze Soldier episode happened, and the people who were against removing the Soviet monument to its rightful place in the cemetery, where it really commemorates the dead, wherever side they were fighting, was calling himself with this particular name. So the poetic image with just one name gathered a huge momentum. Later on, of course, it turned to the Crimea, and today we, of course, are much more concerned and much more serious about these images. The second image that came after that was then another cult film made in Russia, where you clearly could see what was the direction of value system, where it was talking about Chechen mafia, but then later on the new negative heroes were promoted in this image, and then there was one particular image there. You'll pay for Sevastopol, you pigs. And for those who don't know what Sevastopol is, I'm sure most of you do. Of course, it remained there, and it never went anywhere. And today we are facing this horrible war between Ukraine and Russia, which really is much wider than just these two countries. It is really about the value systems. And both of these films and both of these images, in a way, captured the future that even I could not foresee in my darkest imaginations. And the image then was not really digital, but it became digital in the Internet Research Agency very soon, and went into a new development of its own kind. That brings us to another image where we already can see that the reality has really taken the digital turn. This is Luca Bruno. The image was made probably for Associated Press in 2005, and it is the inauguration of Pope. A very old and understandable procession. People come together, they witness what is happening, and they know all about it. As Gadamer said, theorein, in theory, people coming together and being part of that event that everybody knows. But there's another imagination of the same event, and this is by Michael Sohn, also for Associated Press, and it was made in 2013. And in the internet, I found them very often together, and they really show us a kind of new turn in digitality. And it is not just that we've taken over the new technologies, and it is not just that we've got new implements. It really is about the existence of human understanding. When first we come together and witness the event, it's an existential part, like offering and communion after the offering in ancient Greece, where people come together, pray to the gods, and then have the meal together. Being there is the existence. But in 2013, we already can see that I'm there to make the image. I'm there as much as I have made the image, and I am as much as I have uploaded that image. Then I saw a peculiar statistics from Statista, and we see that between 2006 and 2016, a lot of IT tech companies have surged up in the most capitalization values of companies, in public companies. And we can see that the energy really is going down and the tech firms come up. So something has happened between these years 2005 and 2013, so well depicted by the images shown above. And of course the tech companies are doing fine. In 2018 they've grown. We can see all the important companies up there, and even further after the COVID, it is a fantastic growth that these tech companies have had. Now my question for myself was that if we are talking about poetic visual image, which has an energy that not noticeable before, and if that energy is now turned into the technical development, into the technical devices, when would that happen? And I look at the Apple iPhone, and we can see that 2007, it's barely there. And it gets its momentum somewhere between 2013, 2014. The same happening with Apple Mac a little bit earlier, when it reaches to that certain plateau where the sales go steady. And what we've ended up really is a new type of instrumentarium. It's not a camera, it's not a computer, it's not a phone. It's all together. And depending on the size of the screen, it can do different things, but basically they all do the same thing. And then suddenly it is quite clear that there is a whole great world behind the screens, and we communicate with that world through the screens. And every screen is actually an image, a poetic visual image. Even in its most simple format, as a text, it has up and down, it has right and left, it is orientated, it is before and in the background, and if we steadily look at it for some time, it also has time endurance in it. So this is the fantastic device that has spread the image all over the world. And here are the sales, and we can see that you don't change the phone, at least I don't, every year, so it must be that the whole mankind is saturated with mobile devices that actually have that capacity of visual poetic image beamed all over the place. And here we can see also the social networks that have been taken for granted. Recently I was at a conference in Tartu where the Research Council of Estonia was describing how the research money is going fine. And everybody were happy about it, except me. And I was thinking that mostly the money that we have for research really goes into positivistic sciences, also goes into the exact sciences. And of course, with these sciences, we can let the rockets go to the moon or shoot our enemy if we want to. But what if next time there would be millions in the Capitol Hill who have been living and getting the energy from the digital, poetic, visual images. And of course then it is clear that the images are not that very simple as we always take them. They have a lot of meanings behind them, because image is something that is not a text, that cannot be defined, that has all the layers, all the potential meanings of all the potential viewers with them. And suddenly the image from Capitol Hill is connected to the Minotaur, to the Pasiphae, to the Theseus, to the rape of Europe by Zeus, and part of advertising taking us to the multitude of meanings that we really don't know, which are common to us, which are archetypal. Until the animalistic way of human beings still not coming together about whether we should kill the bull or not, and the bullfight being a caricature of the sacrifice of a bull since times unknown. But all of that becomes most certainly part of the reality. So we might say that all our work, entertainment, communication are compressed into an image, into the image of the screen that comes to us since 60,000 or even more years behind. Now, some words about this revolution, which probably has taken place. Already in 1973, it was clear to Daniel Bell that some things are going to change. And who takes the care to read his book will find that fantastically he could predict everything that has happened 50 years later. And he was the first to describe the three technological revolutions. Then came Jeremy Rifkin, renaming it Industrial Revolutions in 2011. And then 2014, in The Economist article about the special report of world economy, it was already becoming the massive knowledge of the third great wave. And they presented this table, which I find very fascinating. And here it is shown how the timetable of the industrial or technological revolutions have happened. And then, which I've marked slightly out in the Britain and United States, how the speed of GDP growth has moved. So as Kuhn has said, Thomas Kuhn, that after every new creation and innovation, there is retooling, and it will take time. And this is what economists really promoted, that in the late 20th century, promises to deliver similar mixture of social stress and economic transformations as before. So we are actually in these transformations with the black swans of the history. And of course then we have the quantum computing coming. And here is another metaphoric saying by this gentleman who has studied it, that if someone reaches to the 200 qubits, and Rigetti has at the moment 128, we are actually able to do computations as there are atoms in the visible universe. So that has really been the way until here, which in a way allows me to believe that digital reality really is there. I also try to generalize what has this new world shown to us, what has happened so far. And we can see 6 generalizations that I would like to point out. I'm not going too deep in them. First, there is a plenitude of information. It has a possibility to self-copy and distribute itself all over the digital networks. It is not the question of finding the information. There is plenty of it. How we find it, that is something that we need to understand and find a way. Secondly, the elements of documents, fiction, advertisements have amalgamated together the public and the private, but also reality and fiction. Whereas there is private, there is always fiction, and that becomes the reality. Thirdly, the genres we've had so far since the Renaissance at least also have disappeared and have produced a peculiar digital world which is post-truth, post-statistics, post-facts, and also post-public media. It has become private. Then there is the hybridization of material and digital through the Industrial Revolution. In its fourth wave, we have the Internet of Things coming to us, and last year Antoine Picon was showing the hybridizations of bits and atoms. The virtual presence, with the help of iPhone first, the digitality of our eyes have been shut, and that actually brings forward all the fantasies and imaginations in the form of existential reality for a human being who has 2 eyes and can see the world in a spatial format. And then sixthly, it is the Raymond Kurzweil, where the digital and informational are proposed to fuse together. And that will happen to his mind in 6 or 8 years, as he has predicted. Maybe it has been brought further on, when he can upload himself into the digital networks and live forever. So if we look at these empirical, speculative generalizations of digital reality, we can see that the 6, at least 4 of them, deal with a poetic visual image. And that visual image is of archetypal nature. And I would call it imagospheric condition, because there are so many images around us, they form almost an atmosphere. It's virtually impossible to step out of the world of images. So this is the predominance of archetypal image I would read into these directions. And then the 3 of them most certainly deal with science, a very complicated science. Today, mostly geometrical and mathematical nature. But this science, as we've seen in the past 5 years, has really been fantastic and unpredictable. So I think we are polarizing as humankind around these 2 directions, fantastic and seemingly simple image, and fantastic and utterly complex, but fascinating the same way, science. Now, the world history in these 5 years at least have seen several unpredictable events which have catalyzed this digital reality for sure. We can name here the election of President Trump, or the COVID pandemic that hit us, all mankind, with unprecedented power, and then also the war, the horrible war, like the Second World War in digital age in the edges of Europe. Of course, it could have been predicted, but nevertheless, nobody believed it, like nobody believes there are the black swans. But what we see is that COVID pandemic has really severely changed the way we live, we learn, and we experience. The e-learning, the connection between patient and doctor, the distant working. We can see only that 1/3 or even less would probably change back to the reality as it was before. And then the remote learning, of course, grows. And here is one Statista image that caught my attention, a polarization within remote working. First of all, it is that it's the benefits of it which really boost the digital networks, and then the loneliness or the lack inside the networks, which then boost the social networks, and savings and public cloud, and then of course the AI market. AI market that has come to stay with us and is boosting this fantastic and utterly complex way of understanding. And of course, you all know about DeepMind. And now I've come to the end part of my presentation, where I'll try to make it as short as possible. It concerns our school. This is the new development of AI. 2 of the journals have already taken up. They have hopefully not fired the graphic designers, but nevertheless the AI images are there to stay. And what is the creativity and innovation in arts and in design-led disciplines, one has to ask. And then the recent AD published the new Rembrandt amongst the machine hallucinations, and the Rembrandt itself is fantastic. AI has come, and we can only imagine what will happen to it when we have the quantum revolution approaching in fast speed. And now I come to the end conclusion, why we should have this conference and why I think Estonian Academy of Arts and as also the architecture department has to work here. And when I was delivering the lectures on future studies, what could happen, I suddenly realized that much of my lectures, as this one here, is about images, which is sort of at the edge of the whole processes, although I hope I have the feeling and have at least made you question about it, that it really is in the essence of digital revolution, this image we look at the screen. And I pushed the image part into the lectures, which I called composition, which has been a kind of obsession of mine for some time, because it looks like the composition is disappearing and design is coming instead. And when I was reading the Oslo manual, which describes what the innovation is, it has suddenly enlarged the innovation from the business models and the business achievements to private persons, communities, local governments, and non-governmental organizations. And an innovation requires implementation. It always is a creativity and then the conscious way of putting it together. And I realized that the higher levels of composition on top of rhythm, color, elements, proportions, the semantic, the functional, and conceptual composition, which we are so familiar in design-based disciplines, and especially in architecture, where the building has to be taken to the final level. It is exactly the way the wide processes of innovation are described. So we maybe have something to investigate and also to publicize for others what we do in design-based disciplines. Thank you.
you so much. We still have a little time if there are any questions now or comments. If I may have one, there's when or if the AI is taking over, would that mean that the responsibility will have a different meaning or kind of dissolve at all? I mean, there is no one responsible really anymore.
It's a complicated question. I think there are so many things we can't even imagine what is going to happen. I thought this digitality is a major revolution we are going through, but as soon as the AI takes at least tangible steps in our everyday reality, I'm not sure what will happen. I don't think we can imagine it. As Statista was saying, it is two-horse race. It's the conferences, it's the conference papers, it's the research institutes, mostly in US and China. So there would be the world dominance, who will master the artificial intelligence. If Europe puts all its resources together, it's close to the at least financing as much as US, at least publicly, is financing that. But to imagine what will happen and what kind of legal, cultural, economic consequences we will have, this is for all of us to imagine. This conference, I hope, is really for that imagination.
Yes, if one would say that there is always a counter force, what would you say is the counter force to this development of digitality?
Well, I'm a Luddite, so an old conservative, trying to keep the new things away. I hope that human being, in its errorous way, is more creative than the artificial intelligence. So I hope, without really foreseeing it myself as a researcher of what is happening and what will happen, but I hope it is their human creativity, which is fragile, which is unpredictable, which makes mistakes, but definitely is there, has been there at least for 100,000 years. Now they say that the 60,000 years of cognitive revolution that we really dedicate to the Homo erectus is really older. It is that the Neanderthals were perfectly understanding the matter of art and garments and also their fellow human beings. So for 100,000 years, we've somehow managed. Will we in the future? I don't know. But that's the hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jüri, for this kind of eye-opener that what you said, if I understand it right, that the poetic image or the poetic imagination is everywhere in its quantity and also the way it influences our imagination. You said that maybe as a kind of resistance we still have to have human creativity against this artificial intelligence or the logic of the economy. And that made me think that maybe art schools, arts, architecture, all the professions which are in the mediation of values, that perhaps they have, or us as designers, because the design is now total, that we cannot escape the digital reality and the images it is producing. You have shown that. It's even a big economy and all those images we make ourselves through certain frames, etc. They produce a lot of images, and I think your listing is extremely challenging, and I think very sharply put. So if the poetic image is total, I was thinking there are different poetic approaches. So now we are overthrown by Hollywood movies, and we see also, you showed this gangster and mafia movies from Russia, etc. I think there is a very specific kind of image produced by Hollywood, by Apple, by Netflix, and that influences our behavior a lot, and that we see back in the selfies being shot, how a woman should look, a man should look, etc., etc. And I have the feeling we have to produce another kind of images. And I was wondering, because I think we can't escape it, so where do you see a chance to, within this world, how we could start to make another kind of images?
You're quite right there that these images are value loaded, and the more reach they have, the more viral they go, the more unifying they are. That is for sure. I have a slight hope here, as I tried to show with just some brush strokes, that the image also is extremely complex, where the Latin culture tried to desacralize it. The Greek culture actually, and the Greek Orthodox through Byzantine to Russia, actually kept this sacredness of the image. Icona is the image, and it has survived. It's the icon. We can still see it in the Orthodox cemeteries. It's the icon of the person deceased. It's always there. So it is sacred to a certain extent, which means it also has several layers in it. And I hope even the bluntest images that can be produced have this second, third, and fourth layer in the archetypal, in the unconscious, conscious levels. And I think the possibility for creative schools and design-based schools is really to not to try to enhance it, or not to try to develop it to a certain extent, but to be clever. Which means I'm always fascinated by Erwin Panofsky. His analysis of the movement of images in the history, in meaning in visual arts and in some other essays. He didn't have a digital version of Wikipedia. He didn't have the Google reverse investigation of images. He was looking at the books in the library. But with the erudition there, he could suddenly see the important connections. And if we can convey these complexities of culture, human culture that we've reached, if we can at least open these worlds to ourselves and to our colleagues, students, then I think we have a hope there, because it is embedded there. It very often does not come out of the poetic image so easily, but it is embedded there. It is like a microcosm of its own right, which then, if we are lucky, we can somehow open up. That is my hope for the schools.